like to start with, how you became to be a composer because you studied computer science at university and then you transitioned to becoming a composer. So I want to ask how that happened.
Well, to answer the question, uh, the the path or trajectory that you just mentioned is how I experienced music or how I learned music. But basically, I always loved to writing music when I was very young, even from when I was like 13 or like 12. But at the time, my piano skill was quite rudimentary, and I got a software called Visual Composer, which is something like a modern DAW. I mean, in that time frame, it is a like MIDI sequence program that you can write music with the software, but it's not as fancy as nowadays software. And there I began like copying multiple pieces that I like game pieces, game music, or animated film music, something like a Totoro. I copied that one. And at the time, I didn't have to have the ability to dictate like side read music because the software just articulated the sounds if I want to try to copy the music. You know what I'm saying, right? If
Yes,
you
I know.
click a note, that you can hear the note, the actual pitch. So I didn't need to have that skills. So I just enjoyed copying music to the computer. And then that was the beginning of the composition for me,
That
like composing experiences. And then after time, I became more interested in writing music than copying music. You know, it's like a machine learning. If you
yes.
learn many pieces, and if you copy many ideas, then you begin to write your own things. So I began writing when I was like about 14 or 15, and then I began writing like some popular musics and so. And later on, I encountered uh, multiple pieces, like classical pieces. I mean, I loved analyzing pieces by Beethoven or Bach, but when I actually encountered the score of those pieces, those were very different from the sequence MIDI rules files. You know, when I copy those music into the computer, I have to convert all the information into MIDI data or the visual composer data, the pitches, and they call that velocity, and an instrument, and so on and so forth. So those information became very huge. I need to spend a lot of time to notating that into the software. But when I checked the, for example, Moonlight Sonata by Beethoven, it was just like 3 pages long, and it included enormous amount of information. And
Uh,
my conclusion was that I really needed to study those so that I can be as effective and as concise and as efficient as possible to implement these ideas into this like notated output. So at the time, I already was accepted as a computer science major at Yonsei University, South Korea. And so I decided to study music from the very elementary level so that the composers that I admired, such as like canonic composers like Beethoven or Mozart, I wanted to study those elementary things so that I can go to the, I mean, like a much further level. So
mm,
eventually, I reapplied after graduating Yonsei University. I worked as a software engineer, but I had to practice piano to enter music major in like US universities. I could not go to like Korean music major schools, I mean music schools, mainly because when I was a Yonsei University student, it was not allowed for computer science student transfer to music major there. Uh, I also was thinking about entering other music major schools in South Korea, but the level of entrance was extremely demanding. For
Yes.
example, if you want to go to, I don't know if it is still in that way, but if you want to enter, for example, Seoul National University, you have to have a skill of a year training or dictation, nearly like perfect pitch. You have to be able to dictate like atonal melodies and so forth. But I could not do that. So, but I was quite sure that I could write music very well, very creatively, very differently from other composers, other like classical music composers. At the time, even when I was using software, I already was composing like atonal music because I really liked those qualities. I didn't know any about Schoenberg or Webern or Berg. So I wrote music what I wanted to write, and then I was very lucky so that I was accepted at schools in the States. So I began my musical journey as my second undergraduate degree student.
Wow. That's a journey. I mean,
It's not, it was not my original purpose that I entered to computer science degree to
oh, okay.
study music, but
Okay.
I entered computer science degree and then I was still writing music and I was trying to be like film music composer or so. And then
Mm,
I entered multiple courses, I mean music courses such as choral conducting or orchestration classes uh, in music school at Yonsei University. But I was not allowed to transfer as a music student in that school. So I had to graduate and then to uh, so here is what you just mentioned. I wanted to understand all the things, all the theories, all the practice. I wanted to go through all of this. So I decided to begin my second undergraduate degree. So I practiced piano and I studied sight reading and dictation with private tutors while I was doing as a software engineer. And then after finishing my military service duty, I re-entered uh, in the University of Rochester Eastman School of Music.
wow. And yeah, and do you feel like your computer science degree has kind of like like a unique influence on your music writing, compared to other composers?
So I believe the path that I uh, took from 2008 or even 2002 when I decided to go to the US to study music from the fundamental level, and I began practicing piano from Brookmiller from in 2002. And then I finally could play some of the pieces by Beethoven and Bach and Chopin when I did the entrance exam at Eastman. Even from that time, what I'm trying to say is the knowledge and theories and all the practices I learned from that time point until now is not very different from what other music school students learned when they enter, for example, some music school in the US or in Europe, in South Korea, or wherever. But because I had this background already in computer science, I absorbed and I digested that practices and knowledge all into myself, but I also could have a different aspect and different perspective on the knowledge. So
Mm,
I really try to be as
interdisciplinary.
traditional as classical possible, but because of my background and nature, I also could not be as traditional and as conservative or
I see.
as classical possible because I already knew that I already have this very distinctive nature of trying to see everything in a very clear and very logical way, very way that I wanted to understand all the different aspects and dimensions and hierarchies and the theories behind the surface level. That's what I really try to understand, and that's how I proceeded from the beginning level.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, that totally makes sense. So your logical way of thinking kind of impacted how you wrote as a composer as well. It
Yeah,
gave
so
you a new perspective.
let me give you an example. This is I now I can think how can I express these things. You know, as you just mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, this younger generation student performers have a very like strong antipathy on contemporary classical music because of the huge amount of dissonances or the randomness and the ugly sounds. Me too. When I began my studies at Eastman, I really loved like these consonant sounds, like Beethoven or Mozart, where when I entered my one of my favorite composer was like John Corigliano, whose music is
Ah,
quite consonant. And so for about like 10 years from my freshman until my graduate student years and my doctoral degree years, if you enter a contemporary classical composition major, there's not such major. If you become a composition major student, you have a multiple opportunity to meet a lot of contemporary classical music composers. So we have a seminars, forums, like master classes and all the things. And whenever I attend a class in which I could meet a contemporary living composers, I always asked, how can you create harmony? Or how can you create your musical language? Because I was very curious. If you destroy all this classical music theory, for example, one goes to five or leading tone goes to tonic, so on and so forth, then everything else could be like dissonance or random. So I wanted to know the logic behind that, behind this dissonant sounds. And I think that's the basic attitude that I had from the beginning of my career until now. I still, when I write music, I really need to know why I created this harmony, why this note. That's always in the center. And that logic is very important to me.
yeah, that is really, really interesting. And I think that's a really good message for, I mean, all musicians because we need to understand why we make the conscious decisions we do as musicians. Like art in our artistical decisions, we need to know why we did it. And so that's a really good message and an example, I think. I kind of wanted to ask, like, um, so you started off by using these like what was it? What was the software that you said you started off using to compose
Oh,
or to
it was like 30 years ago. It was a visual composer.
Visual Composer? Yeah, is that still around or has that like improved or changed in any way?
You
Like
can think it is
what is
like
the
a prototype of a logic.
do you think that that kind of makes it more accessible for like amateurs or like people who completely haven't tried anything of that sort, trying to get into compositions like these new technologies? How are they impacting how people are getting into the industry?
I think that's a really excellent point. Actually, using those dolls can be a great experience and can enhance the accessibility, the understanding, the intelligence, and all the things happening in the creative process very well. It can support a lot for the performers. For example, it can easily visualize uh, the musical performances into the visible way in two-dimensional. For example, if you see this software, you have this timeline in the x-axis and then frequency domain in the y-axis, for example, like a piano roll in the y-axis, so that you can understand the music very acoustically.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a great tool for people trying to get into composing. And yeah, one particular aspect that I'm also interested um, with music and technology kind of combined is how technology is impacting music education. So, like, I think a great example of like like you said, your elementary level school daughter having a lot of technology in her school to help her learn, like in institutions, for example, like how's technology being implemented to help composers?
Oh, sure. For I'm teaching music theory, and I always am trying to employ more and more technology in my classes. First of all, as you said, it really helps students to understand music in general, but it can also be a great tool for them to work when they graduate, where they can use those tools to create their own music. They can create some background sound for their YouTube videos, where they can use that acquaintance and knowledge and practices when they go out and get a job in a, for example, sound studio, where they
Mm,
can
yeah,
become an engineer. And others are like technology also helps that student to do something that was not possible to do alone. For example,
right, right.
uh, we are using some dictation software, and then the dictation software play the music and student dictate those melody, and the dictation software automatically generate if this melody is correct or no.
I see.
Yeah. So
That's really interesting. Yeah. And go this kind of I think relates to AI as well. Like how do you see AI impact in composers and contemporary writing right now?
oh, that's very difficult question. Uh,
So maybe like a more specific question would be like what ways can AI and machine learning be integrated into the creative process without compromising the artistic authenticity of that composer?
I think it will be eventually employed in a way that works for all the other field as well. For example, AI will be able to do some very traditional repeat oriented works that requires a lot of time. For example, if you write an orchestra piece, you have to make like more than 40 parts. And then
Mm,
AI will be very helpful to align and arrange those parts from the orchestra score. For the creative process, I think what AI can do, I mean, I know that AI can do a lot of creative things, but that will not be very much creative. It is generative, but what I'm trying to say it will not be very innovative or creative. And the aims for myself as a composer or classical contemporary music composer is creating music that is innovative and creative and interesting. But what AI does is creating music that is not innovative. That's the purpose of the AI. That's what
mm,
AI is doing now, or the other field in all other fields. They are trying to create output that resembles the pre-existing output. They learn
right.
how previous composers created music, and probably they can create a very nice pastiche piece. For example, they can create a piece that sounds like Mozart, that sounds like Beethoven, but they cannot create a piece that is entirely new.
Right.
Of course, that can be possible if they can mix the style of Mozart and Stravinsky and Schoenberg together, and probably that can be possible. But uh,
Still not completely new.
yeah, yeah. So I mean, that's new, but that should be navigated and controlled by an author, I think.
I see.
Yeah.
So AI is being used as kind of like kind of like like a grammar checker for like essays, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can also guess that creators can try to use AI to see what will happen if I can try this and this and this thing all together and mix those things. AI can show those results. For example, if you do the, was it DALI or what was the AI technology that paint?
Um,
DALI is one
oh
thing,
yes, it is Dolly. It is Dolly.
and the other one was a mid journey. Yeah. So if you try to do the mid journey, I used that for like 2 months, and it is very easy to ask mid journey to paint Pikachu in a style of Van Gogh, and then the mid journey just paint a very nice Pikachu in a very yellow color in a brush stroke that is reminiscent of Vincent Van Gogh, and that's possible with the AI. And if you want to be an artist who does in that stuff, that's fine. But that is also possible if we know what to do and there exists such data that AI can learn from that. It cannot be something super innovative that is like coming out from nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think that's one of like the most like issues within the ethical part of AI, which is like they're not original. How do you see AI shape like being used in the future um to aid composers?
Yeah, I mean, so I can give you an example how I used AI technology. I mean, in my creative process, I have recently wrote a new piece for solo piano, and here's the way how I treated AI technology. So I used the AI to write music in a style, specific styles, and I used those the music in a specific style as a raw material that I can use for my creation.
Yeah. Because I saw in one of your projects that you composed the piece for a computer and was it piano? Is um like I don't know if that's different from what you did but with the AI, but I kind of wanted to ask like what was the process for that?
So in my conclusion or in my opinion or in my purpose, the output that was created by AI was something that I need to recreate. It's like AI was, if you go to some workshop of a studio potter who create like ceramic art, they have this machine which mixes clay. And for me, AI outputs were like those clay mixing machine. And if AI machine create these clays or raw materials, I use that as a resource that I can create my own artwork from that. But it cannot be my own artwork.
Yeah, that sounds something really interesting to explore.
Yeah, I mean,
And
it will happen a lot. I mean, it is already happening. Many creators are doing in that way. Because for example, if you're a painter and you have this idea and you want to see how the painting will look like if we combine this idea and that idea, and even if you have an AI, then you don't need to spend a lot of time to see the like temporary output before creating the actual output.
kind of straying away from AI and technology. I know we have only a few minutes left, so I wanted to ask about atonal music. So you one of your main focuses in your works, or all of them, is atonal music or harmonies, right? And so and what's interesting about that is you said you were interested in atonal music from a very young age. So how did that happen? Because I know a lot of people my age who would actually shy away from atonal music, but how did you become attracted or drawn to it? And do you have any people like advice for people who want to kind of get into like listening to atonal music, what they should listen to first, what they should experiment with?
So my conclusion or what I'm thinking currently is it is very natural that you dislike atonal music. It really is related to our evolution. You know, human vocal cord is a string, which means it sounds like your violin. So if I say this it is ah, but because it creates all partials in overtone series, which means overtone series are all about the consonances. And then if you go to the bottom of the overtone series, where the lower rank of the overtone series is an octave and fifths, and then fourth and third, and so forth. So our human ear is evolved in a way to capture or to enjoy these pure ratios. And atonal music really focuses on the dissonant ratios, which does not exist in the lower rank of the overtone series, but the upper rank of the overtone series. So that's very natural. But what I encourage for you to understand or to enjoy the atonal music is to understand this hierarchy. For example, uh, there are nowadays a lot of music or composers who focuses on the area, not just these super dissonant upper partials or those dissonant ratios and harmonies, but try to navigate the vast spectrum between these consonances and dissonances. And for example, jazz is exactly like that. Jazz harmony, a lot of jazz harmonies are like based on the dominant seven harmony,
Yes,
which is actually the overtone series. But as you, the composer or improviser, become more adventurous and to play more with the dissonances, they tend to go to more dissonant area of the dominant sevens, like dominant seven, like sharp 11, flat 9, flat 13. If you add more and more higher partials, it becomes more crunch. But if you work well, then it can create a very dramatic pathos that works well with our context of understanding of music.
I see.
Yeah.
Um,
The main reason why younger generation performers are afraid of playing or dislike atonal music is because it is too atonal, too dissonant.
I see. I see.
But nowadays, or not even nowadays, in mid 20th century or later 20th century, there are a lot of music that does not only focus on the super dissonant harmonies, but the harmonies between the consonant harmony and dissonant harmony. You know, there are infinite amount of spectrum between the perfect unison or perfect octave and
Right.
minor ninths. There is a very vast spectrum, and good music, what I think, is trying to explore the vast spectrum in between those consonances and dissonances. And it's basically like a 5-1. If you study music theory a little bit, dominant seven is much more dissonant than like tonic.
Yes.
From 5 chord to 1 chord, you feel this very huge amount of relaxation and feels like you came back to home. That's what the resolution means, 5/1 cadence means. And
Yes.
if you try to understand atonal music in a way that can be enjoyable, you can approach that in this way so that the atonal context and tonal context can be just relative context to each other.
I see. So that's a more like more friendlier way of looking at atonal music.
Yeah.
And so it kind of eases people into um like kind of going out and experimenting with it.
Yes. That's what I think.
Well, okay, so this is it's 5 p.m. here now, so that's 1 hour.
Okay.
And so thank you so much for your time. You gave such great insight to the questions I asked, and I just know it's like, I mean, this is just the most valuable, I mean, advice and information and stories that you just shared. And I know so many people would appreciate it. So thank you so much.
Just one before stopping the recording, it was my great pleasure to share my music, my experience with you, and I really appreciate that you are interested in my music, but also interested in contemporary music or music composed after 20th century or in the 21st century. I